Today I'm going to tell you about what it was like staying in the hospital overnight after having my pacemaker implanted. So after surgery, I was wheeled into a shared room with another patient, and we were actually in a temporary wing of the hospital because the main cardiac unit was being remodeled at the time, so there was kind of cramped quarters. The room was not designed for all the equipment used to monitor heart patients, and my roommate was actually in there to get some bypass surgery the next morning, so he was in a little bit worse shape than I was, just coming out of the relatively minor pacemaker surgery. So once I got into the room, I was finally able to go ahead and order some room service. Well, what they call room service. It was really just the hospital's cafeteria that would deliver. You'd pick up the phone, they had a little menu, and you tell them what you want. And my nurse and doctor said I was on no dietary restriction because, the electrical problem with the heart had nothing really to do with the clogged arteries or, any kind of healthy lifestyle changes that I need to make. So they said I could go ahead and order whatever I wanted. Well, obviously they had some caller ID down at the cafeteria because when I called, I tried to order a Reuben sandwich, which was on the menu. And they told me, oh, you're in the cardiac wing. We can't give you that. We have to give you the heart healthy menu. And so I looked on the menu again and I found that meatloaf was actually on the heart healthy menu for some reason, if that makes any sense. So that's what I ended up eating. And it was really about the most bland meatloaf I've ever had. So luckily they had some ketchup for me to put on it. So after eating, the nurse came in and checked on me again, and they started me on some antibiotics through the IV line, and they gave me my handy dandy arm sling here. So this is what I ended up having to wear most of the rest of the time I was in the hospital. And it really wasn't because my arm hurt. It was just to keep me immobile so I wouldn't be tempted to raise my arm above my head while I was sleeping. So in order for the leads to go ahead and have time to get secure in the heart and not risk ripping those out, and basically just a reminder not to lift things and not to use my arm. Now, I didn't wear it all the time after I was out of the hospital, off and on, because really your shoulder and arm does get kind of cramped up and you don't want to become dependent on having the thing on. So I was actually more comfortable in most situations not wearing it, and I actually only wore the sling when I was sleeping after I got home. That evening, after I was in the room for a little while and had dinner, they wheeled me out to Radiology so they could take a chest x-ray. They wanted to make sure the leads and everything were in the heart correctly and everything looked good. So they wheeled me down there, and I waited outside for a little while, and had me stand up in front of the reader, and they had a little pole for me to hold on to, and I almost did the bad thing of lifting my arm really high, and the guy, the radiology tech there, he's like, whoa, take it easy, because he did tell me to lift my arm, but I was a little too eager, and I hadn't got used to my restriction yet on lifting my arm up, and I kind of caught myself. So right off the bat, I almost did something I wasn't supposed to, and that was kind of a reminder of why I needed to actually wear the sling to keep myself from doing things like that. So since we were a little ways away from home, my wife decided she wanted to spend the night, and since the hospital said it was okay since I was staying there the night, that she could too. But unfortunately, that room only had one small plastic chair for seating, a hard plastic chair with a metal frame. and she made the best of it. And as the nurse and the other support staff came in and checked on me throughout the night, they would say, okay, we're looking for a better chair for you. They had some reclining ones in the normal cardiac wing, but unfortunately, since it was being remodeled, all that stuff had been hauled off into storage. So what she got was a different style chair with a little bit of a cushion on it to sleep on with the blanket and pillow, and she used the hard plastic chair to prop up her feet. So needless to say, she didn't get a whole lot of sleep that night. For me, I was on and off sleeping and watching TV, and I'd get my phone and watch YouTube and stuff throughout the night. But I wasn't really ever sleeping soundly. I would be kind of propped up in the bed a little bit and keep readjusting because I was a little uncomfortable. Right where in the surgery area, it was a little tender, and so I didn't sleep very well. And part of the contributing factor to that was the nurse and support staff would keep coming in throughout the night. Less for me. I mean, they'd come in every 4 hours or so and check my vitals. They had to put a new IV bag up and a new antibiotic bag. They gave me 2 courses of antibiotics through the IV line. But my roommate, who was in there for the open heart surgery, he was a little noisier. He had a monitor on for they're giving him some type of drug as well through his IV line, and the box that regulates it, clamps around the line and it regulates the release of the medicine. It had an alarm on it that was extremely loud because he would roll over and pinch his line, and when the line would pinch and fluid wasn't flowing through it, the alarm would go off. And sometimes it would take a few minutes before the nurse would get in there to fix it. And I mean, it was extremely loud. There's no way sleeping through that. And the other thing was my roommate snored very loudly. And I felt bad for the guy. I knew what he was going through the next day, but I was hoping for just a few minutes of peace and quiet. But my wife joked with me. She said, that's kind of silly that you're complaining about his snoring when you do the same thing. Although she said, usually I'm not quite so bad. And the last thing that kind of interrupted the sleep throughout the night was he was scheduled for surgery first thing in the morning at 6. So they came in to get him prepped, and they basically did a sponge bath and did all kinds of preparation, sanitizing the area, shaving, they did all this stuff in the room with us, and it was 3 in the morning because they had to get him ready to be in the OR at 6 a.m. So after my roommate was wheeled out, we had the room to ourselves for a little while around breakfast time. And like anytime you're in a new place and you didn't really sleep very well and you're up, you're like eager to eat breakfast and get going. And if it was a hotel stay, you'd be ready to get up and go and leave. You're tired of waiting around. So I went ahead and ordered breakfast, and I really don't even remember what it was. It wasn't anything spectacular. My wife went down to the cafeteria and grabbed a few things, and we were waiting for the doctor to come by and take one last look at me. And basically, because I hadn't had a fever and I had the 2 courses of antibiotics, they were pretty sure that the risk of infection was low. They said, we're going to go ahead and get you ready to be discharged. Well, before I could do that, they wanted somebody to come in and take a look at the pacemaker. Actually, they call it pacemaker interrogation, where they put the pacemaker reader on and they pair you up with the laptop and they check all the settings and make sure everything looks good on the pacemaker. So after a while, I did finally meet the technician that would come in, and I'm not even sure what really to call him, but they're a specialist trained and they usually work for the pacemaker manufacturer. I've noticed they have a badge, and they brought in the specialized laptop just for my device, and they hooked it up, and after about a minute or two, he said everything looks good. I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and be released. You go home and in 10 days you're going to go back to the cardiologist's office, and he's going to perform a wound check to take the bandage off, and going to go ahead and do another pacemaker interrogation to make sure everything's looking good after 10 days. So after the pacemaker interrogation, the doctor came by with my release instructions, and they basically told me things I already knew. I wasn't supposed to lift anything with my left arm heavier than a milk jug. I wasn't to raise my left arm above my head for any reason or do any kind of strenuous motions, no swimming, no push-ups, basic things. Just keep the arm calm. I could use it, but just don't do anything very strenuous with it. So for the next 10 days, I really did take it easy at home. There was the holidays in there because I got the surgery done right after Christmas, and I missed a few days of work. I took the 2 days immediately after off. Then I had the weekend and the New Year's holiday, so I did get a pretty good break from work. My job really isn't all that physically strenuous all the time. We do a wide variety of work. I do some stuff at the desk. We also have to go out of the office and do some kind of work that could involve heavy lifting, but a lot of that wasn't scheduled for the time where I was recovering. And because the 6-week recovery period where I was supposed to take it easy and not lift anything, that time period, my coworkers could do any of the minor lifting that had to be done, so they kind of helped me out there, and they were team players. I did have the sling that I showed earlier. I did wear that for the entire 6 weeks while I was sleeping, because I'd be known to move around, so most of my sleeping was restricted either on my back or over on my right side while I had that on, because it wasn't all that comfortable to sleep in. It took a few nights to get used to sleeping in the sling, but you kind of adapt after a little while. Finally, the thing I was happiest to be able to do again was to be off the driving restriction. Now, they told me, because I had the pacemaker, I'm on the backup now. If I had a heart pause, the pacemaker would kick in, keep the blood flowing, and keep me from losing consciousness. So that was the main driver behind them telling me not to drive before, was that if I lost consciousness while driving, I could crash the car. So since that wasn't a concern anymore because the pacemaker was in and working, I could go ahead and drive. I just had to take it easy and not use the left arm while turning and things like that. I still took a few more days off than they told me I had to from driving. I don't think I actually drove again until after the wound check 10 days later. And having that restriction gone was probably the biggest relief. And you don't really realize what a big part of your life driving is. If you need to go to the store to pick up a gallon of milk, you need something, your daughter needs something for school. It's so convenient just to be able to hop in the car and go and do it, not be relying on somebody else. So in the next video, I'll go ahead and talk about that trip I took up for the wound check, what to expect when you're in there, removing the bandage and re-seeing the scar for the first time. And also they did another pacemaker interrogation, and I'll tell you the results of that and what to expect in the weeks to come after having your pacemaker implanted.
Subscribe now. Resistance is futile.